Hey there, friends. So today we have a very special episode in that I was doing a coaching call in my working title writing incubator, and only one writer showed up. And when that happens, it's sort of like, ring the bell, a special magical thing has happened. And they basically get a free one-on-one. So we talk kind of more in depth about their book project, their genre, like the whole process, everything from drafting through querying and publishing. Whatever they want, we talk about it. And today's episode is I guess, like abridged version of that call that I had with one of my authors, Libby. And she is working on a quiet horror set in a fictional Appalachian town, Jubilee, West Virginia. And this story is super creepy, super compelling. And she's a phenomenal writer. I cannot wait for this book to actually be alive out on shelves. Right now, she is wrapping up the draft, and then she will go through revision, and then she'll be ready to query agents, and hopefully we can see this published in the next year or two. That's my dream. So yeah, this is just kind of a little intro to let you know why the sound and video quality are probably going to be a little lighter, because I recorded it on Google Meet and I didn't know it was going to be a podcast until we had a really awesome conversation. And I asked Libby if I could share that with all of you, and she said yes, absolutely. So without further ado, here's Libby Edwardson.
My kids were showing me some trailers for new horror films that are coming up. And I was like, I know the Oscars is just like a popularity contest, and it's really like not a mark of the quality of an actor or a piece of art. But I was like, the Oscars are going to have to start taking notice of horror pretty soon, because some of the best movies, some of the most innovative, some of the most beautiful movies being made right now are horror films. And so they are going to have to stop being so elitist about horror and realize that, that people want it. And I think that, something I love about horror, and I'm thinking about films here, I'm not sure how this applies to books, but if you notice, a lot of horror fans are female, and horror is the only genre that has more female leads than male leads. I think male leads only make up like 30-ish% of horror films, like fully like 70% of horror films have female leads. And so females have more speaking time, more character arcs, and so I think that that's the reason that horror appeals to a lot of women, because it's where they see themselves represented in film.
That has never occurred to me. I also wonder if, like, because when you said there's more women in horror, I was like, are they getting brutally murdered? Like, I think that's part of it too, is like horror that's written like for the male gaze is probably going to be violent toward women. And then we get like really nuanced horror, I think, from like Jordan Peele. I really want to watch his stuff. I'm scared, but I want to watch it. Like, I like thrillers because I like to experience like the height of my emotions. And horror to me can just be a thriller, or can also be like gratuitous violence, gore, everybody's getting raped and murdered. And I'm not here for that. Like, that's not my brand.
I'm the same. There are hard passes for me in horror. Like, if you're going to put in cannibalism, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in that. Like, that's just not my thing. I don't like a ton of like, essay in it. I don't do torture. I don't do like the inbred hillbilly, trope. I don't like, there's a lot of like tropes that I just pass on. Like, that horror is not for me. But
great to know. That's a data point.
Yeah, and going back to like what we were talking about with women, there was a lot of horror that was made for the male gaze, and women do experience violence, but also that's where final girls come from. Final girls are the girls that made it through, that powered through and defeated the monster in the end. So even the ones that were made for the male gaze do have at least one like singular heroine who like overcomes the ultimate evil.
You're making me want to write a blog, which means I'm going to have to like watch Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th is not even scary anymore. I promise.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's
Awesome.
really not. Yeah. All of those that like sort of classic ones that we grew up, I think like being like, oh, like that's, a slasher too scary for me. They're really not scary at all. Like all the Freddy Krueger movies, they're really not scary. They're sort of more, some parts of them are kind of more funny than scary. Like Friday the 13th, Halloween, all those, they are not child's play with Chucky. Let me tell you 100% that is not scary a little bit. Yeah.
I remember watching The Exorcist when I was in high school and being like, people were like terrified of this. And I really got to remember that, like when I shit on The Breakfast Club, because like the cultural context is very important when critiquing older films.
Yeah.
Any film, like cultural context is super important. So like when we didn't have horror stories and practical effects where somebody's head spins around and like they vomit all over a priest, yeah, that's going to be very jarring. Like that's going to be revolutionary in a genre. And then of course we're so used to gratuitous violence constantly in 2024 that we're like, that's not scary at all. Like that's so crazy. Why were people in the 80s so timid and weak? And it's like, because like, let me tell you what's the word? Exponential. I'm like, the existential growth. No, the exponential growth of like the media's capacity to be grotesque and full of violence has been like a phenomenon for like probably like Gen X and beyond. Like each successive generation is more and more desensitized to horror and violence and is leading to like major, huge, like empathetic burnout.
Yeah, it really is. Because I remember like my girls wanted to watch A Clockwork Orange. And I was like, guys, that like has like some really rough scenes in it, and like they watched it and they were like, where? It's like, oh.
I had a psychology professor in college who showed like the opening scene of it. And I was like, oh, this is not for me. Like,
I was like, as I read the book and then I watched the movie, and I was like that movie, like it was hard for me to watch back then. And they were watching it and they're like, what's upsetting about this film? I was like, oh, oops. Yeah, things have changed.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But if you want to watch horror, like Jordan Peele he's a really good place to start. Like, is Get Out scary? Yes, of course, Get Out is scary, but it's also super funny. So there's like a really good balance of like, oh my God, I'm really, really scared, or with, oh my gosh, this is like pretty funny. So like it kind of it lets you breathe, I think. And it's not like one of those that just like Ari Aster's films, like once the switch flips in those, you don't have any time to breathe. Like if you're watching Hereditary, once you get to the scene that lets you realize I'm not watching the film that I thought I was watching, that is it. You are like strapped in for the rest of the ride. It's intense. Like, so those are like more sort of like, how they're like beginner, intermediate, advanced. I would say Ari Aster's more like advanced horror, like
double black diamond slope, whatever the skiing term is. Yeah, I need like gentle horror.
Yeah, because Nope is my favorite film, like favorite horror film, and just my favorite film. And a lot of people didn't like it, and I think they're just fundamentally missing like what was so great about that film. Because first of all, I mean, aliens, so like of course I am gonna love that film, but it like underneath, Jordan Peele's so amazing at layers. So yes, it is an alien, but it's this very unusual alien who's like, basically watching you. So there's like a commentary on like how like we're constantly perceived in this, age of like, Zoom and FaceTime and all of these, things. There's no privacy. And then under that, it's Hollywood's treatment of groups that they don't value, specifically people of color and animals. So like there's like that whole commentary on like how like disposable like those groups of people are to Hollywood. And there's just like it's one of those that every time you watch it, there's like a new layer of the onion that you're like, oh, I missed that the first time. So there's some like tense moments in it. And there's one moment that's like, it's like hard to watch because of what's happening to the people on screen, but it's not gore. There's no real gore like that you see. There are things that happen that let you know gore is occurring off screen.
Okay, but that's exactly like the kind of violence I can handle. So George Miller is the director for like the Mad Max films. I think it's George Miller. Let me look that up and fact check myself.
Like the new ones like Fury Road and Furiosa and all those.
Yes, Australian filmmaker. I believe he also did like, Happy Feet and Babe, Pig in the City. But he's actually done all the Mad Maxes. So 1979 Mad Max 2 in 81, Mad Max Beyond in 85, Fury Road in 2015, and Furiosa in 2024.
I just assumed they switched directors.
No, apparently this guy, he's the guy.
Wow.
So I have only seen Fury Road and Furiosa. My partner tells me that's all I need because I'm like, okay, good. He's my like filter for movies with violence. And he's like, oh, that one's not for Caitlin's. Or because he loves film so much. So we talk about film and media in the house constantly. And I'm obsessed with it. And I want to do like more talking about film and media and storytelling like everywhere in like everything that I do. Like, I don't know. I'm going to start a new blog.
Yeah.
Lynn talks about film.
We're a big film family. Like we really like films. Everybody in the family likes films. Like we literally like before October we make
blessing.
What's that?
I feel like that's such a blessing that like everybody in the house.
Yeah. Because we make out like an October list, like for a horror movie, like every day, like a different horror movie every day. Like we have like a little cauldron and we put them on slips of paper and we put them in there and we stir it around and then we pull out like our surprise horror movie for the. It's super fun.
I do insist in December that we watch hokey Christmas movies because they make me happy.
Yes.
And so I think with October coming up and spooky season already upon us, this is a great time for my foray into the feminism of horror.
Yeah. And if you need suggestions, I am happy to make horror suggestions. Okay.
Write me a list.
Yes, I will write you a list. What is exciting to me as a writer, and of course, I know not many books get made into films, but you still like you let your mind wander and you're like, oh, what if my book got made into a film? That would be so cool. And I think what's so interesting about that is like, if that happened, like, I don't think authors can be precious about their books. I think they have to understand that when a filmmaker is creating a piece of art based on the book that you wrote, that becomes something completely separate. Like that's its own thing. And it does not have to. I love when they make like wildly different casting choices. Like I loved The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. I don't know if you read that book, but that book was phenomenal. And I think of it sometimes because the main character, the little girl, was similar to Skinny with the blonde hair and the blue eyes. And in the film, they cast a black girl. And I thought that was fantastic. Like, I think like the story took on like a completely different like tone and a completely different direction. And I just think like, I personally love it when filmmakers do something. And of course, there's like Lord of the Rings. And yes, those are beautiful and they're very true to the books. And like, those are like comfort food. Like, I love the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing a rewatch of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And those are beautiful films that, are very book accurate, not 100%, but very book accurate. But I love it when a filmmaker, like, I don't know if you probably didn't watch Antlers because it's also kind of scary. But that was literally based on like a tiny little short story that was published in Guernica magazine. And then like it was extrapolated into this film, which again, a lot of people didn't like, but I really enjoyed.
I'm obsessed with this.
Yes.
And I have magically retained the thread of George Miller to finish my thought there, which is that in Fury Road and in Furiosa, like when there is violence, especially violence against women, it is off screen. Like, or there is a hint that tells us what happened or what might happen. And he does not make you like watch violence against women in his films, and I love him for that. And I know that like anything directed by George Miller is going to be safe for me.
Yeah.
Even if something sexually assaulty starts to happen, I know that like he's a safe director and he's not going to do like a gratuitous rape scene.
Yeah.
And that's how I do horror and gore and violence and stuff too. Like we watched Braveheart, and there's this moment where like somebody like swings some medieval weapon and like pops somebody's head like a grape, and I almost threw up.
Yeah, I have never watched Braveheart. My husband likes Braveheart, and whenever it's on, I'm like, no. I've like reached a point in my life where I'm like, I'm not watching films that I don't want to watch. And so I have let my family know war films, they're out for me. I can do supernatural violence. I can do, scary serial killer violence. I can do things that require imagination to get there. But if you're showing me a war film that is based on history, and I know actual people experienced many of the actual things that are happening in this film, I can't get it out of my head. I feel gross. I feel upset. And I'm just like, no, I'm not doing war films. No more.
That is totally fair. And that's a great, like, empathetic boundary, because real people lived this violence and I don't need to watch it to know that they went through terrible violence. And like, okie dokie. That's really good. So
Yeah.
we watched, I would not call it a horror film. I would call it almost a biopic, maybe, but Judas and the Black Messiah.
That's on that's my watch list.
Okay. So it is about the assassination of Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers.
I know about that. Yeah.
So that is very real violence that really did happen. And it was a beautiful film. It sort of centers the experience of the informant who ended up like giving him the drug that knocked him out. And so I believe the FBI was able to assassinate him because he was incapacitated. And I remember watching it and seeing Lakeith Stanfield, who played the informant. I could tell that this role was wrecking him.
Yeah.
Like, and so I'm Googling furiously while we're watching it. And I'm like, how did Lakeith Stanfield feel about Judas and the Black Messiah? And it was the first time he ever went to therapy, was when he was acting in that role.
Yeah.
And it really did a number on him psychologically to participate in the portrayal of violence against the Black community like that.
Yeah.
So I get exactly where you're coming from. Like, I don't think I would be able to play a part where I'm reenacting real violence that happened to somebody of like my own community.
Yeah. And I think like, because I'm pretty sure Judas and the Black Messiah has a Black director. I'm almost positive about that.
I'm almost positive because
and I think like that for me is like where I might like make exception to a rule, like probably not so with war films, but like with actual things that happen to actual people. Because when people are telling stories from their community in the way they want the stories told, then I think like it's my responsibility to watch those things and to learn, like, take away, what the filmmaker wants me to take away from those things. And so those things I am purposeful about watching, and I will consume.
Yeah. Watching it like, with intention. And it is a Black director. It's shocking.
Yeah. But like, like I won't ever watch 12 Years a Slave. Like I'm not watching that movie. So I have like definite like lines in the sand that I'm not crossing in what I consume, because I am like, even though I love horror, I am really sensitive. And so like I get and I think in a lot of ways that's why I like horror so much, because like you're seeing people kind of at their most vulnerable, like pulling on this inner strength that they don't even know they have at the beginning of the film or the beginning of the book. So yeah, I think that's why I like the genre.
Tell me about like your horror and like what influenced you to like write a quiet horror that was based in Appalachia.
So basically, like my main motivator is I'm sick of the media stereotypes about Appalachia. Like piss me off. They make me really angry, and they're lazy. They're just so like lazy and easy. There's just like, it's like low hanging fruit. Like you can just pick those, and there's no nuanced understanding of the region. And so I wanted to, and we had a bad time at the end in Appalachia, like we had to leave under emergency circumstances. I know that there are dark parts of Appalachia. I know that there are things that make living there hard for a lot of people. But also, like, Appalachia has like one of the richest cultures, that has been sort of like fostered here in America. I think there are like communities of people throughout America who have persevered in spite of like endless attempts to grind them down. And that's, like, I used to, just get political here for a minute. I used to say like, well, I'm going to get out of America. Like it's a terrible country. Like there's too many bad things happening. The politicians are against us, like whatever. And then I'm like, no, you know what? I am not getting out of America. I am staying here. You cannot have it. It is a beautiful country with people who have created beautiful things here in spite of everything that has been done to them. And you can't make us leave. You can't have it. Like, that's how I feel now. I'm like, it's not yours for the taking. And so, like, I think with Appalachia, like, that's, something that I really wanted to put into a book. And when I sit down to write, oftentimes I find myself like in those mountains, because when you visit the Appalachian Mountains, they're so ancient. There's something really like just primeval about them. They're really like a part of the earth in a way that many things are not. They have been here. Like if you maps of Pangea, like they've always been here.
They're the same mountains as the Scottish Highlands.
Yeah. Yeah. And they span like vast, and they've gone, like they've fallen, and they've also then risen again. So they simultaneously have some of the oldest rocks in the world and some of the newest rocks in the world. So they're like super fascinating. And I just, I'm really drawn to the idea of when you dig deep into mountains that old, when mine when too far, when the greed of men like pushes them too far into those ancient spaces, like what might be released, like what might be lurking there that you should not have disturbed. And so that was kind of where my mindset, I wanted the horror to feel like something ancient was stalking people. And I wanted also like an overarching theme to be like the things happening now in this Appalachian region that I've, created. They're mirroring in many ways what's always been done to Appalachia, how it's always been undervalued, how, Appalachia has, I think I wrote a line similar to this in the book, but Appalachia has given us, like, every time America asks, Appalachia answers. They've given us, energy. They've given us their sons and daughters when there's a war. They've given us Dolly Parton, so like what, like they have given so much to America. And when there's nothing in return, there's nothing. It's like it's like Appalachia's poor. It's always been poor. It's fine if it always stays poor. They're just dumb hillbillies down there. They're disposable people. And I don't condone that. I don't agree with that. I think that Appalachia, like any region, yeah, are there garbage people there? Of course there are. Are there stupid people there? Of course there are. I live in Blue Hill, Maine, which is like, like a super well-to-do area, and there's garbage people here. There's stupid people here. There's no region that has the corner on like, ridiculous people. So I just think for me, I wanted a horror story that reflected those themes, but also genuinely like creepy and scary.
You have nailed that. Every single time you submit a chapter, we're all like, Libby, what? I love it. I love it so much. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that that's going to be a big part of like the appeal of your book and the appeal of you as an author, because you're not just checking yourself into a pond where your mom brings you sandwiches and you're like, I'm going to write about the simple things. Like, no, there's so much love and grief and hope in your like vision of Appalachia, in your vision of this story and everything that you're telling. Like, these people may be fictional, but they're very real to you, and that's going to come through when people read the book.
Thank you.
So
yeah,
that's also another reason to like, don't freak out about like revision and getting it perfect, because it's going to be a winner because of the care that you are putting into it.
Thank you. That's super important to me. I want people to pick up this book, and I want people to see themselves reflected in it. I want it, no matter where they're from, I want them to see that these characters are characters that are going to be experiencing things that you have experienced and making choices that you might make. And I'm trying to be very purposeful about making sure that there are characters in there that everyone can identify with, because I don't think books that don't make room for that, I don't think they're the best books they can be. I think that, and I there are some, if you're setting it in an all boys school, it's going to be hard to have, a lot of female characters, but like setting it in an all boys school is a choice, so I just think there are choices you can make as authors that allow the stories that you're creating to invite everyone in. And so I'm hoping that that's where I get to in the end.
I think you are well on your way.